Bonjour, bienvenue sur le plateau d'Informatic News pour un rendez-vous un peu particulier en partenariat avec l'IT Press Tour qui organise sa 45e édition à Paris. Et à cette occasion, nous avons le plaisir de recevoir Dave Zabrowski, qui est CEO of DataCore. Dave Zabrowski, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you to be here, to be back in Paris.
Good. Let's start to give some data about your company and present, roughly for our audience with, some of them may not know DataCore. So you're based in Florida, Fort Lauderdale. You were founded in 1998, something like that.
Yes.
You're specialized in storage, and you have pioneered the SAN virtualization.
Yes.
And you claiming having more than 10,000 customers. That's, what I can tell about
Correct,
your company.
yes.
Could you add more specific?
Sure, yeah. Well, the company is, since 1998, it's been a privately held company.
Still.
It is still. Our largest investor is Insight Venture Partners, one of the largest and most successful software companies in the world. We've been fortunate to have them in the company since 2008, so they've been very instrumental in guiding us. I joined about 5 years ago, and the company had a very successful SAN virtualization product. In fact, the company invented the concept of software-defined storage. And so we basically have those customer base. It's a very global footprint. We have customers all over the world. We do business in over 80 countries. And we've just finished our 13th consecutive year of profitability, including the 2 years during the difficult COVID period.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about your products and portfolio of solutions. So you are involved in bloc, file, and object. You bloc with SAN Symphony,
Yes.
Object with Swarm, and file with vFilo. Could you give us some details about these three lines of products?
Sure.
How do they work separately, or are they going to work a little bit together?
So they work cooperatively together, different code bases, but they do work under a single pane of glass that we call DataCore Insight Services. The traditional product is a block product, which is based upon high performance, high availability. Basically, the more data is valuable to you, the more it needs to perform, the more it needs to be valuable, the more you need SAN Symphony DataCore block storage. It's a very successful product. Our customer retention rates are extremely high. We're the highest in the industry. We have the highest customer satisfaction rates in the industry as well. And that product has been very successful because we've built a very lucrative reseller base all over the world, working with companies from the largest enterprises down to mid-market. When I came into the company, that was the product. That's what was defined as DataCore.
So that was the product of the company, the main product.
It was the product, yes. And then we built out through some additional investments, focusing on other areas, particularly in unstructured data, which a lot of the new applications for the CIOs that are listening, a lot of their new applications that they're focused on machine learning, artificial intelligence. These are creating massive amounts of unstructured data. And so we actually went out and created a couple of new products in file and especially object, which is the primary vehicle for unstructured data. And so those three products sit side by side. And then more recently, we announced a container-based product around the Kubernetes framework.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that one. And so let's, before going further to that line of products, you're just in the software business. You're not proposing appliances. You've never been in that kind of business?
We have not been to date, that's correct.
You don't have any plan to do that?
We will.
Oh, okay.
Upcoming, we have an announcement that I'll mention as well as part of this experience. We will get in the appliance business. But by and large, for the core, which is really in data centers, most companies want the flexibility of defining which hardware they can sit on, either existing hardware that they're trying to get more utilization out of, or new hardware, and they don't want to be tied down into certain specific hardware. And so we sit as a software-defined storage layer above anyone's hardware, regardless of whether it's an older hardware or whether it's a
new one.
Yes.
So you consider yourself as a software company?
Correct.
Basically.
Yes.
Okay. So to go a little bit further about the product you just mentioned, you have an approach that you call DataCore One.
Yes.
And is this like a superset of function that give the users to use all the three line of product altogether, or is this something different?
Well, it's based on the industry of storage, which has been very much siloed historically, because most of the storage was done on proprietary hardware. So if you were in the block business, like EMC, for example, historically, they built a successful business around block. If you are a NetApp, they built a successful business around file. And what the industry wanted to do was get away from the proprietary hardware. And so when we talked to CIOs around the world, everybody was like, can we get something that works with all the hardware, software defined? A lot of the other technologies in the infrastructure space, if you look at networking, you look at compute, et cetera, they moved away from proprietary hardware. That's what the DataCore One vision was intended to do, was to move up above hardware and offer software-defined solutions across the spectrum of storage: block, file, object, backup, et cetera.
So is this like another piece of software that you're offering to your existing solution, or is this, what is it exactly? It's just a vision, or it's more than that?
It's a vision that has underlying storage solutions, and then there is a central portal that sits across those that offers a common user interface to those products, so customers can actually go into a single portal and utilize their various products underneath it from DataCore. Okay. So the idea is it's a unifying storage approach so that a customer doesn't have to buy proprietary hardware from vendor A for one solution, vendor B from another solution, or vendor C from another solution. It's offered by one company at the software level that works on anyone's proprietary hardware.
So in the journey to have like one piece of software that manage everything, do you think we are there yet, or we will still have a lot of work to do because it's still pretty difficult and have a lot of problems?
Well, I think it's evolving. I think in general you'll see the industry moving more towards common framework. We talked about containers briefly. Kubernetes is that common framework. Mm-hmm. So I think as an industry we're seeing more commonality, focusing on common framework, and then they can build pieces underneath that framework, but the overarching interface with the customer is a common framework. So that's the trend as we're seeing more and more of.
Okay. So you just mentioned Kubernetes and the containers. So you said you were pioneered the virtualization on SAN, and then there is like a new wave of technology called the containers, which hits probably 5-6 years ago, and very likely at the beginning, yes. But now it's beginning to be more and more interesting for CIOs. Do you think so? It's called DataCore Bolt, I think,
yes.
And it was announced at KubeCon in Europe, I think.
Correct.
Is it the beginning? Because we've been talking a lot about containers for server, I mean the compute, but a little less for storage. Do you think this new wave will replace the other one? I mean, I'm talking about virtualization. Are they going to coexist? How are you going to manage that?
Sure. So I think for new applications moving forward, you'll see the vast majority of applications being created around a container framework. So that's what we've seen in the industry. Yes, it started 5 years ago, but even in the last couple of years, we've seen an acceleration around Kubernetes. The amount of development and the amount of users, 97%, according to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, 97% of enterprises in the world are either using Kubernetes or are evaluating Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. So it is the future. The reason it's the future is it's the most fundamentally efficient way of deploying applications. If you look at it from an agility perspective, you can move it from on-prem to cloud to off-prem to another cloud to edge back extremely easily. It's also secure because it's wrapped in this self-contained environment. And thirdly, it's the cheapest from a cost perspective, so that if you look at density analysis, you can get the most cost-effective way using a container approach. That said, the storage has been the hardest piece of the puzzle to solve, because the nature of containers is they come up when you need them, And when you don't want them anymore or don't need them anymore, they actually go away. And so that's one of the reasons it's so efficient. With storage, you have to keep track of that storage. It's called persistent state. And so you have to keep track of it. So when something else is respawned, you actually have to know that, and it's being able to track it. For the CIOs out there and your listeners, Kubernetes is already on their strategic agenda. And they'll already be evaluating, the vast majority of them will already be evaluating Kubernetes. And storage, the solution that we brought, is the best in the industry. It's through an acquisition that we made called Maya Data, that we acquired that company in 2021. They have a Kubernetes community version of that product called OpenEBS, and that product is receiving well over 1 million downloads per month. For just the storage piece of it. So we're already starting to see the acceleration. And it's a very exciting transformation because the CIO agenda is all about digital modernization. Now they can modernize their applications with a container-based solution.
What about complexity?
Well, the Kubernetes it's a framework that is well accepted in the community. And so it is the standard. There are no competing standards out there, so people are able to absorb Kubernetes. They do have, there is a learning curve, but there's also ways if you don't want to take that learning curve and make the investments, there are service providers that are
doing that for you.
That are doing that. So customers have choices. Your CIOs can do it internally if they choose, or they can go to a service provider and get that Kubernetes expertise.
Okay. You mentioned the cloud, you mentioned the edge. Are you interested in this market, or are more than interested, are you involved in this market, and what do you do exactly?
Yeah, well, you mentioned DataCore One, so that's been our unifying vision. Now we're moving into what we call DataCore Next.
Which going to replace, or which
it's going to extend? It's going to extend it from the core to the edge to the cloud. And so for us, we're actually making an announcement at the Media and Entertainment Show in Amsterdam this weekend called IBC. We're actually entering into the edge computing market. That business line is called Periphery. It's a new business model for us. We're launching it with a partnership with a company called Simply, which is basically a company that's focused on media and entertainment, and they will be taking our software and creating a media and entertainment focused appliance that will be targeted towards edge computing applications in media and entertainment. So this is our first investment into edge computing, and then we'll follow it on with additional enhancements through our roadmap investments, where we can get different verticals, different solutions, things like healthcare and other verticals, where the edge computing will be very important.
IDC is telling us that the edge is going to be the market you have to be, so you're going to be there. But what about the cloud? Are you are selling to enterprise, but are you what kind of relationship do you have with cloud providers? I mean, do you have are they integrated your solution in their data center? How does that work exactly to have like a seamless integration with a data center on-premise and on the cloud?
Well, that's the beauty of containers. Literally containers, with the click of a mouse, you can actually move workloads from one application, from one site to another. And so clouds, we work very cooperatively with the cloud providers. We don't see the market as either or, we see it as and. So we think core, edge, and cloud will be seamlessly working together. And especially edge computing, it's a very difficult problem to solve because the massive amounts of data that people like IDC are forecasting, more than 50% of data being generated in 2025 is going to be generated at the edge. The edge has a lot of technical problems where you don't have access all the time. There's tremendous amounts of difficulties getting data back. So our approach is to bring the compute to the edge instead of bringing the data to the compute. So the data gravity problem that exists today is you have to basically bring the data back into the compute, whether it's cloud or core. What we're doing is we're actually bringing the compute to the edge where you can process all that storage at the edge and then only bring the very few amounts of data that you need, typically metadata, back into the central location.
But I suppose the balance between what you're going to do at the data center on premise and on the edge will depends of on the application, and it will be a very complex problems to solve.
It's going to be very use case focused. So if you look at edge computing, for example, in the healthcare area, you see a preponderance of data that's going to be generated at the patient. And that will not allow the time to go back and process it in central. If you're robotic, let's say you're doing robotic surgery, and you have to go inside a human being and make on-the-spot decisions about whether cells are cancerous or not, all that machine learning and artificial intelligence has to be done on the spot. You have literally seconds to make those decisions. And so there's a lot of applications that have to be processed at the edge, and instead of that data going back into central, the DataCore approach for DataCore Next is to bring the processing power to the data, process it there on the spot.
And how do you sell your products? Are you going direct, or do you have partnership with big ISV and integrators that will do that part of services?
Yeah. So we do partner as part of our history at DataCore. So we have a very successful reseller base, and then for these verticals, we actually have alliance partners like the simply example that I gave that have focused on media entertainment. We're partnering with them. They'll take the DataCore Edge solutions and wrap around their own solutions and take it into a use case in media entertainment or in healthcare.
So this company will use DataCore without knowing that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you think it's this application will come pretty soon, or we'll still have a lot to work to do on the technical side to have something that's more stable? And
well, the building blocks are all there. So part of our DataCore One vision were the acquisitions of the object storage and the containers. So that code base is there, it's solidified, it's stable, and it works very well together. So the building blocks are already there, and they can be trusted. What we're doing with each of these use cases is wrapping around a solution that takes those already stable code bases and puts them into a use case, like the healthcare example I gave you. Media entertainment, good example, is a lot of your processing for production. Everything was shut down during COVID for production. So there's a massive wave right now of on-site production. I mean, at industry rates never seen before. Not only 4K production, but 8K camera production. All that production needs to be processed at the edge. It's just way too much data. And that's what we're doing. We're working with partners like Simply to basically bring that solution to the edge so that it can be processed where the production is happening on site.
Let's talk a little bit about the French market.
Yes.
Could you give us some names of customers, what they do with your products? Could you give us some names of ISV and integrators, working with you in the French market?
Well, we have a very broad success in the southern region, in the French market. We have a loyal set of distributors. We have a loyal set of resellers. I don't particularly want to name any one of them because I'm afraid.
Okay, yeah, the other one will say, sure.
But we've been
to
here.
Give us a list of all of them.
Yes, we have been here for many years, and it's one of our fastest growing regions of all DataCore.
But customers, are you targeting special sectors, or are you?
Yes. In France, we have particular strength in media entertainment, in retail, and in healthcare. Those three areas are where we've got the most success.
So you don't give names of these customers, but for example, in retail, if we're thinking of the big names, there is a good chance that they're going to be our customers.
Correct. They're name brands. And then typically what we do is, if any of your CIOs out there are interested in DataCore, we actually have a very loyal list of references that we can give privately, and they can talk to our customers and hear the experience that they've had with DataCore. And that works very well in the French market for us.
Just to wrap up that conversation, you said at the beginning you're still a private company in the American way.
Yes.
Is this by choice, or is this because no reason you were like this and there is no reason to change?
It's been more popular the last 5 or so years. The private equity markets, especially in the U.S., have been very, very very aggressive in investments. So a lot of your companies are choosing to stay private because it's the most capital efficient way of funding a company. And so there's a lot of money in the private equity. Insight that I mentioned earlier, they're in the private equity market as well.
So do you think it gives you more stability?
Well, it gives you access to low cost of capital, but without the tax and the burden of being a public company. When you're a public company, not just in the U.S., but in France and elsewhere, you have certain regulations. You have to comply with certain disclosures to public. You have to deal with a lot of different regulation agencies. When you're private, you still have
basically
access.
You do what you want.
What the investors and you agree to, but it's also a very good source of capital as well, like the public markets.
Okay, just following on that, because you're private, you don't give, you don't have to publish anything, and so we like to know a little bit more about that, and also I suppose CIOs, when they're signing contracts with vendors, they like to know, are they big companies, small ones, and are they?
And in those situations, we disclose our financials to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But could you give us some details to us too?
Well, I think the most important thing is...
You said we're
profitable.
For 14 years.
This will be our 14th consecutive year. That's unheard of in our industry, especially going through COVID. So that's the most important thing, is we're profitable. We're backed by a $50 billion private equity company, Insight Venture Partners. And generally, when they talk to our customers and they look at our financial stability, they give us the double thumbs up.
So when a customer is signing a contract with you, he doesn't have to have any doubt about are you going to be here in like 10
Correct. They can invest in confidence because they know we've been around, we're stable, and we're well backed.
And you're going to be around for you.
Correct, yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Zabrowski.
Great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.